Okay, Potato, are you ready? We're gonna do it? We're on. Come here. Is this the intro? Can we do a little more?
Space vehicle pre-count operations will start on my mark in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Love with Strangers. I'm Wiley, and today we're gonna go on a trip. And it's gonna start with this song called Hey Sandy by a band called Polaris. And if you are my age, you may remember a show called Pete&Pete that was on Nickelodeon. And I'm bringing this up because a while back I went on sort of like this brain nostalgia tour where I was like talking to my own child, and we were talking about music that kind of it's like music. I called it music that you want to crawl inside of, you know, or that crawls inside of your heart and kind of like rips you right open from like the inside out and makes you feel like love or feel joy or feel something that is just like an emotion so separate from other kinds of emotions. I like the idea of crawling into a song. Like it's a song that you want to sit in and live in, and it like makes you feel a certain way. FYI, while I'm recording this, the cat has jumped up here, and he's been a real holy terror. Wants a lot of attention, so he's going to try to wreak some havoc. But we'll see how far we can get with things. Anyways, just thinking about this idea of, there he goes, Pete&Pete and songs and shows. And I wanted to bring my Love with Strangers audience on a journey with me today to talk about a couple of things, more than a couple of things that have been on my mind. Some things that I've like sort of been occupying some thought space, and I've been building some more thought bridges around. So starting with this idea of Pete&Pete, I'm going to lay it out. We're going to talk about Pete&Pete, that show. We're going to talk about like parenthood, with regards to like identity and transformation. We're going to talk a little bit about queerness, and sort of like navigating identity and just kind of like senses of being, I guess. The queerness of being. I think that's what I'm going to call it. We're also going to talk about a movie that I just watched that's based on a book. But the movie was called Night Bitch. It undid me, people. I was watching it while trying to paint in the studio and ended up not painting and doing a lot of crying. And we're going to talk also a little bit about music and shoegaze music. And I'm going to link a playlist to this episode. And it was a playlist that I kind of put together that was like bringing me down like various nostalgic memories of being a person who was born in the late 19th century, i.e. in the 80s. And just kind of reflecting on like, I'm not going to reflect as a generation. I'm going to reflect as a person who happens to be part of a generation, in a really specific time and place, under fascist rule right now, which is strange. So that's another thing that we may touch on more. But anyways, I'm going to break this down. We're going to have a breakdown of conversation around identity and transformation. We're going to talk a little bit about rebellion and subversion. We're going to talk about the existence of liminality and sort of living in an in-between space. We're going to talk a lot about nostalgia and longing and a sort of the sadness that's sort of built around all of that. We're going to talk about surrealism, not the art movement, although we could slightly get into the art movement, but we're going to talk about surrealism as it applies to like the uncanny in everyday life. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about like sort of like finding joy and leaning into joy in these sort of in-between spaces. I have my notes in front of me this time, so I'm not going to digress too far, and hopefully this won't be more than an hour. I'm really hoping we're going to keep it in the 30-minute range. But anyways, so, okay, Pete&Pete. Let's talk about that show. You do your Google search, find out who made it, when it was done, all of that stuff. And I'm just going to talk to you about what it was like to be a kid sitting in my aunt's house and watching Pete&Pete for the first time. Remember, like, I didn't have Nickelodeon, we didn't have cable, but my aunt had cable, and we would spend time during the summertime when we were out of school at her house. And like, Pete&Pete started off as a small short. It wasn't like a show. So I kind of remember, like, an episode that was about like an ice cream truck and going to see Mr. Tasty, the ice cream guy, and like having this sort of like, you know, this like redheaded kid, I was redhead, having this like sort of funny, weird interaction with the ice cream person. And I was always like, stay away from the ice cream truck delivery driver. They deliver drugs, you know. Like, so here was this redheaded kid, like, kind of my age, like maybe 12, 13, who's like talking to this like ice cream delivery truck person. Their name is Mr. Tasty. I mean, and they're like having like a really decent, funny interaction, and it seems very caring. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what this is, but I really like this little show. And eventually, like, you know, other people liked it too, I guess. And eventually it starts turning into an actual TV show called Pete&Pete. And it's about two brothers who kind of live in this neighborhood, and they have a really weird family. Like, the mom has a plate in her head that like picks up satellite like signals. They have friends who are kind of on the fringe, and it's a show kind of more about like discovering oneself through the people around them, like through the relationship of the people that they surround themselves with. And so it's like, for me, I always felt like the character, like I always identified kind of, well, actually, no, I'm going to say, like, I wanted to say I always identified with the older Pete, but actually, like, I kind of identified with both of them. The younger Pete also had this, like, tattoo of a woman on his arm named Petunia, and he'd, like, make her dance, and I was like, oh my God, this kid has a tattoo. This is so weird. I love this. If I was a kid and I was allowed to have a tattoo, I would. And it was just like about self-discovery. It was like about defining yourself through the environment and the surroundings that, you know, you seek out, or like the people that you seek out and the experiences you seek out. And for the most part, it was very supportive. There was also never the dynamic of like a boyfriend and girlfriend narrative. Like, it was always like platonic friendships, and like platonic friendships with not just other kids, the main characters' ages, but also like platonic friendships with like people from the neighborhood, or sort of like these outlandish characters, like Artie, the strong man, was such a funny character, and like also like kind of neurodivergent characters. So a lot of acceptance, a lot of like care and community, and the show just left a lasting mark on me. An episode in particular, there's this episode where they're trying to find a sound. Like, one of the characters has been riding through the neighborhood, and there's this garage band, and he stops and he listens to this garage band play. And then he's forever seeking to find the sound again of the garage band, because this is before Spotify. This is before, you know, any kind of social media, before cell phones. And like, so it reminded me of the time, you know, when you're like listening to your favorite station and you have your tape recorder on the ready so that you can record the song coming off the radio to put on your mixtape for your person. And, you're just like really hoping, you like listen, and you're like, maybe you're listening for hours and there's like a break in a song and you're like, this is going to be it. And then all of a sudden your song plays and it's just the best thing in the world, and you hit record and you're like so psyched on it. Like that episode is like that bottled. and it's magical because of a few things. One is that it forces you to recognize something that sparks joy within you, right? Sparks so much joy that you want to experience it again. And then also, it is about patience and determination and sort of that like moments of pause to have to slow down and accept that maybe you won't have that instant gratification of hearing that song again immediately, but that patience and time, and that it will happen again. Like they will play the song again. And just kind of like allowing that time and space to slow down and to really notice, because you have to listen, right? You got to notice like all the different songs and what the DJ is saying. And then like to find it, and to wait patiently until it starts playing and then you hit record. Well, like in the episode, he's like traveling the neighborhood looking for the band again. Just like trying to find him. And then eventually, over time, like he discovers it, and it's this kind of moment, like aha moment. And it's really about the ephemeral and the fleeting and noticing in the moment when we're experiencing joy and really leaning into that and not being distracted from it. And like, to me, to have that message in a show from like the 80s, 90s, is a really progressive thing, because there's no way that could have like predicted where we are now. And I think that now we really struggle to be in the moment without sort of being distracted by devices or news or seeking out the answers to information. If I hear like a clip of a song that I like, I can either like Shazam it or type in a lyric into my phone. I mean, I'm like a couple clicks away from finding out what the song is and then listening to it over and over again until I've completely exhausted it, which really loses the magic of something that, piques your interest, sparks joy, and then you wait patiently to hear it again. And when you do, it's like such a moment to sink into. So like I kind of, I wanted to explain that to my own child, and we were talking about music, and this is the Polaris, the intro song to Pete&Pete actually is one of those songs for me. And I will say this, that like I remember one time being in the grocery store with my mom, and on the back of like a Wheaties box, it was like, if you eat 3 Wheaties boxes, or like buy 3 Wheaties boxes and like send in the UPC symbols, you can get your very own Pete&Pete cassette tape of the like opening song. And so I did that. And I actually like didn't just buy the boxes and like, do whatever with Wheaties. I ate the fucking Wheaties, and I took the UPC symbols, I mailed them in with my address, and I received back a Polaris like demo, or not demo tape, like, but like LP, I guess, if you want to call it that, like 2 songs. One was Hey Sandy, and I can't remember what the other one was, but it was like so worth it. And I was probably like a total of 6 months between like starting to, collect the UPC symbol to when I mailed it off to when I finally received the tape in the mail. And I wore it out. Like I listened to that song over and over again. So kind of thinking about that, like thinking about those, that like kind of transformation of self-discovery, in the sort of like moment, that like in the moment vibe, which is like my story of Pete&Pete. And I feel like how I'm going to translate this over into some of these other subjects that I want to talk about, specifically with regards to like motherhood and with regards to like identity and a queerness of being, and even into like this notion of shoegaze music, which we'll see how clever I can be today to really tie it all together. But But this like notion of being in the moment and trying to be present, and like recognizing when the good times are happening. My ex-husband and I used to have a saying. It's like, these are the good times. These are the good old days. Sorry. These are the good old days. Because the good old days are something that you look back on fondly and remember, but you don't necessarily have the wherewithal to recognize in the moment that you are actually making the good old days. And I feel like I was brought back into an awareness around this just a couple nights ago. I was watching the movie Night Bitch that stars Amy Adams. And now's your time to do your Google thing. You can look up all about Night Bitch and when it was done and who wrote the book and who did the movie and la 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 la. I'm not going to go into that detail. But what I am going to go into is how the opening song to the movie was another core memory unlocked for me. And it was an Annie DeFranco song. And I'll link it to this thing as well. But it shook me hard. It was on an album of hers or theirs that was released when I was in high school. And I think it's called Joy. And it's like, I do it for the joy it brings. And, you know, and I'm not going to try to sing an Annie DeFranco song, but the thing that happens with music for me, and maybe it does for you, is that it can sometimes like trigger a memory that maybe isn't so pleasant or heartbreaking. And it triggered this song in particular, took me back to driving down Westheimer Road in Houston, Texas in my Jeep Cherokee. And I was in high school. I think I was 16 or 17, probably 16. I think I was a relatively new driver. And it just reminded me of this moment of really wishing that I could be anywhere but where I was. This deep sadness of feeling like I didn't belong where I was living. I didn't belong at the school that I was at. I didn't necessarily belong to the friends groups that I was like part of. Like I felt in between. I really felt stuck. And I wanted to escape. And, but like it's like you kind of do these things because you have to, and you just got to get through it. And if I could go back to that person, that 16-year-old person and be like, we get through this, don't worry, you do it, and you do all the right things, and you do all the things necessary to get out, and like you're living in an extraordinary life and you're incredibly lucky. I would go back and I would say that to that person, and I would say and also that something I don't talk a lot about is that I do suffer from pretty extreme anxiety, and up until recently was medicated for it. But when I first was medicated for it, it was during the pandemic, and I had sort of reached a point where I was like, I can't function anymore. I need, I'm paralyzed. I need help. And so I am put on an anti-anxiety drug, and within days, it's like an overnight response. My whole reaction to stuff changes. And it was this big aha moment of what the fuck? Is this how some people actually feel and function in the world? And it made me realize, it helped me realize how deeply rooted my anxiety was and how far back it went and how debilitating it actually was as a young person. But I just didn't have the tools to talk about it or to recognize it. And I was so high functioning that I kind of masked my way through a lot of that. And so I would go back to that 16-year-old person and say, what you're experiencing and what you're feeling is actually anxiety, and it's not depression. it's just this like deep rooted fear of the unknown. And let me tell you, it's going to be okay. Like, and so anyways, okay. So that was a long, backstory there on one song related to an Annie DeFranco thing that was played as the opening song for this movie Night Bitch, which is essentially about motherhood and about being a stay-at-home mom, a woman who was an artist or is an artist, a creative, who decides to start a family and is a stay-at-home mom and has a husband that works in and out of the home and works away for long stretches of time. And it's sort of like I really recommend it. It's kind of like it's a dark film. It's funny in certain parts. But if you are a mother and if you are a creative, I think that every creative parent should see this, because what it really is about is that, like, we do these things, we make these sacrifices. Sacrifice is such a weird word. We make these choices in our lives that alter fundamentally how we operate as creative people when we become parents. And I don't think that I don't think necessarily that there's like a specific reason why this happens to some people and maybe it doesn't to others. But it's almost like there's this social conditioning of motherhood, of like the expectation of what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to look like. And I was a pretty young mom. I became a mother when I was 28. And my art career was like just starting to take off. And I remember actually being told in grad school at a meeting that, like, don't become a parent because what happens is your art will forever be changed and no one will ever take you seriously. Literally coming out of the mouth of a male artist in front of his wife, who was also an artist who had children. It was like the most toxic thing. Oh yeah, and I was pregnant while he was giving that speech. It was like the most toxic thing I'd ever experienced. And I want to go back and shake that man and be like, fuck you, you fucking asshole, you're so wrong. And also wanted to shake that artist, the woman artist, and just be like, why are you with him? You deserve so much more. But anyways, the thing that this movie did was that it reminded me that the experience of motherhood and creativity and the pause creatively that we take to raise children, that some of us take to raise children, is not wrong. It's sometimes necessary. It's sometimes infuriating. It's the fuel that is going to propel us in the future to try to, I'm trying to generalize again. I'm just going to keep speaking about me and not generalize. It is, if I didn't raise my daughter, do like the homeschooling and if I wasn't a stay-at-home mom, and if I didn't have the experience that I did, which was really fucking hard, and it was hard for all of us, not just me, it was hard for my partner at the time, it was hard for my kiddo. It was just like, if I didn't have, what it was is that it was lonely and it was isolating. And you with young children, don't use your brain in ways that you would if you were alone in a studio trying to be creative and coming up with ideas. But the thing is that I needed that time to light a fire under my own ass and to really get clear about what my goals are and what I want and who I am. And the movie itself is a little bit of a horror film. It's about a transformation. It's about like a mother that undergoes a supernatural transformation that sort of, intertwines human and animal nature. So like we're talking, human nature, but also like instinctual nature. And I feel like human nature is so wrapped up in anxiety and questioning and And maybe I'm specifically speaking from an American standpoint, but just this like kind of cultural, like, am I good enough? Am I good enough mom? Am I doing this right? I want to do this perfectly, you know, all of that versus like instinctual nature, which is just kind of like that animal identity, which is like instinct takes over and you just put one foot in front of the other and it's about survival. So yeah, so here's, you know, cue the song. I'm all of a sudden like paintbrush in hand. I put the paintbrush down. I start sobbing. I tap into this like primal moment. And I'm like, every mother needs to see this. By the way, my friend Amy, who's also an artist and an incredible like businesswoman, she's the one that was like, watch Night Bitch and like get back to me. We need to talk. And of course, like I'm halfway through the movie and I'm sending it to every creative woman, mother I know. But the thing with that is that it's pushing up against this theme again that I'm like, you know, I think I'm bringing up today, which is about like tradition and non-tradition, transformation, and this sort of like subversion of like subversion of what we accept as being a normal thing, and not, you know, it's like, I don't know, I guess if it's like the opposite essence of what I'm trying to say is like, how can we embrace our weirdness and be more authentic? But also sometimes like embracing that weirdness is about going back to the way things, like going back a couple steps. So like this morning I was talking to a friend about convenience and how, you know, right now, actually, she used this she gave me this incredible quote, and I'm gonna say it here, which is that right now we need to cosplay as the peasants we are, and it's so true. And it's like, you know, we've gotten so used to having these like really specific conveniences as Americans, and like right now it's time to kind of go back to the way things were before Amazon and all of, you know, that sort of like direct sale convenience. Which just also goes back to this idea of like, go to the small mom and pop shop, build that community, get to know your neighbors, because to get through this moment in time, we're really going to have to rely on each other as a community, which comes into this idea of a queerness of being. So, okay, before I get to the queerness of being, no, I guess I will just sort of jump into that. I think I am going to jump into that. Like I think of queerness as sort of like a liminality, like an in-between space, a space like a third space, an in-betweenness, an othering, and like an identitative othering, but not in a bad way, like in a really positive way. Because it sort of like exists in the in-between of like sort of like more established identities or categories, societal categories. And, you know, I think about Pete&Pete as a queer show in a way, because it was so much about platonic relationship and friendship and care. And it didn't follow that sort of like normal pattern of a kid's TV show. It like hardcore leaned into the weirdness of things. And I kind of feel like this notion of like, you know, like even motherhood can feel really queer, right? It's like this transitional state. It's an in-between worlds, because it's like you go from being pre-child to then instantly being post-child. And it's not an easy transition. Even though you're given sort of 9 months, you have 9 months of like building this being in your body. Like it's just this like all of a sudden once they're out, it's a whole other thing. And I kind of feel like in terms of my own identity that like there's not a pre or a post. It's just kind of in this like, it's always kind of existed in this liminal space. Like I've never really felt like quite Texas enough. I'm certainly not Vermont enough. I've never felt Maine enough, and I don't necessarily like I have places where I feel like I belong, but they're always kind of in this third space. And I believe I spoke about third spaces in the last episode and the importance of building these, because a third space isn't something that's necessarily defined, and it allows for that sort of like freedom to figure it out as you go along. And for me right now, it's like thinking about the state of the world, thinking about that we're falling into this fascist dictatorship here in the United States, and like people asking, what are we doing? How are we handling this? And everybody handles it differently. Like there are different levels of action and resistance. Those who repost, those who do. Those who are creative, get creative. Like we can all kind of like lean further into our specific roles that are like, when I think of a role, like I'm thinking of more of like a gift. It's like, what is the gift that you can bring to the world? Or what is the gift that you bring to the world, and like, where is your strength, and like act in that. And so kind of thinking of that third space of resistance, of like, resistance doesn't have to look a specific way. It can look a lot of different ways. And this sort of like uncanny moment that we're living in is surreal. It's like disorienting. It's strange. It's not familiar, but it is like there's a familiarity to it. It's like full of the absurd, full of like just this kind of spectacle as well. There's like a combination of horror, and then there's a combination of romance. And I think, and it's just like an otherworldliness, really. So that third space, it's like, can I accept existing in that third space and creating change from within that space? Maybe that's what Love with Strangers is. It's my third space, where I can talk about these ideas that are coming up in my brain and make these connections, and hopefully have an audience of people that are listening and are, would want to contribute to that conversation. Because I don't want this to necessarily feel like just a navel-gazing moment, But I'm also like trying to post less on social media and kind of share these ideas here while I can, for as long as I can. So, here's the thing. It's like at the core, all of these elements are exploring transformation, temporality, rebellion, nostalgia, and this surrealism. I think back to surrealism, and it's like go back to Le Comte de Lautremont's like Tales of Maldoror, and that's where Andre Breton sort of plucked the manifesto sentence of an umbrella meeting on meeting a sewing machine on a dissecting table, or something like that. I'm probably butchering it. But this idea of like two opposing concepts meeting in a completely unrelated space and having creating context. I'm going to simplify this. Objects that have nothing to do with one another meeting out of context to create meaning and conversation, to ask questions around. That, to me, is what surrealism was. And surrealism was so much about the sort of horrors of fascism and political crumbling and deterioration. But also, I don't want to not acknowledge the fact here that the surrealists were like horribly sexist and actually kind of had a bad influence on American artists when they came to the States. But like what, I'm not going to get into that detail. You can research that. But anyways, so like, whether I'm talking about motherhood or queerness or like a kids TV show or like, we haven't even gotten into shoegaze music because I made this whole like once I started listening to that Polaris song from Pete&Pete, like all of a sudden it was like triggering these like shoegaze songs. And like, don't even get me started on the Ani DeFranco thing. Like, I'm not even going to make a playlist on that right now because that's just too raw. But there's this like beauty in sort of like strange, ethereal, layered soundscapes that come in with shoegaze music that heighten like the sort of heighten an emotionality, like a floatiness with sort of these like dreamlike sonic reverberations. And how does this like fit into this, right? So like this is my question, which is like, you think of shoegaze music as sort of like hazy, heavy kind of wall of sound and like ethereal vocals, like wistfulness. But it, to me, is sort of like an in-between musical genre, like an in-between sound. Again, a third space of sound creates sort of this like dreamy, floaty vibe that's very introspective and kind of abstract. And I just recently went to go see Slowdive with my eldest kiddo. And I was like, I looked around and of course everybody there is like basically my age or my child's age. Because it's like back, like it's back. Things always come back. And I'm just like kind of lost in this like dreaminess of this sound and feeling like I'm connecting with something that's like, it feels spiritual, honestly. Like if I don't go to church, but that's what it kind of feels like. It's like connecting in to something more unifying. And I kind of wonder if like folks in my generation, like, is that, do we gravitate to that? Like, and then when I'm talking about folks in my generation, like, I know that we're a diverse group. So I'm really only speaking towards, the creatives that were sort of more on the fringe. But like through that sound, a space is created to honor an in-betweenness. And it's sort of like, it also like kind of rejects the like normalness of like sort of like a more mainstream sound. And yeah, it's just like, it also like, I feel like sounds and music like that, like it seemed like being at the Slowdive concert, it was like, I was like, oh, like when I first started listening to this stuff, like I really felt like there was hope and that like change was possible. And that, like transformation, like personal transformation is like akin to, like a spiritual awakening in a way. So, there I am, I'm getting a little preachy, but anyways, there's a lot to tie together. I am going to put the playlist, the Pete&Pete, the On a Trip playlist link here. I'm going to put a link to that one specific Ani DeFranco song. I'll link to info about Night Bitch, the book. You should read the book before you see the movie. The movie was epic, though. I'm not trying to be on a moral high ground here. I watch movies and stuff like that and don't read the books first. But I had a lot of people reach out to me in my DMs being like, oh my God, the book's amazing, or you should read the book. And so like, I think I'm going to read the book. And I've actually already ordered it, so I'm going to read the book. But, and then, yeah, it just kind of, what else am I going to add to this? I'm still trying to figure out closed captioning. I'm going to work on that. And have some sort of visual running in the background. But if you like this, if you think that this is interesting, if this is stretching your brain or creating new thoughts or I don't know, whatever. If you like this and you feel like sponsoring me, awesome. I appreciate it. I'm not asking for a lot, just very little. Like, I think it's like somewhere between $3 to $5. If you want to have a yearly membership, it's $36. It's like so cheap. So consider supporting this. It's a creative endeavor of mine that I do outside of work. And or alongside work, I should say. Like I kind of have like several different gigs. I have the full-time job, normal job, and then I also have the full-time normal art painting job, and then I do art consultations, and then I also do stuff like this. And that's how I support myself and my family. So if you feel so inclined to sign up and become a fiscal sponsor, I thank you. And if you don't, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Continue to join. Please share this with people. I don't necessarily have the goal of this becoming like some, blockbuster podcast type of thing, but I do feel like it's a nice place for us to meet up and to think about things, and for me to bring disparate ideas to a place to say, hey, there's some connection between these things, and I'd like to share with you like what I think these connections are. And why I think that they're important, that you should consider that too. And then I'm also open for discussions around it. So have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Try not to, get overworked within that news cycle. Carve out a moment to listen to some shoegaze and try to transcend this for just a minute. It's okay to do that because the shit that's happening is going to be here for a while. And we all need to have a minute to sort of get grounded and regain ourselves through it all. So, all right, take care.